Hey, it's Ben Wise from ZOAR Fitness, and today we're going to be talking about optimizing the pedal stroke. So not necessarily how we can generate more power through our physiology, but how can we optimize our technique in how we're pedaling the bike in terms of at what part of the stroke are we generating power or potentially not generating power, and how does that going to lead to efficiency on the bike. So again, the goal is for us to use the least amount of power to actually generate the bike and get the most amount of wattage out of that. So how do we go about that? So the first thing we have to realize is that we don't want to apply pressure everywhere through the stroke. There's going to be an ideal spot to apply pressure. So just as we come over the top of the stroke, so if we compare this to like a hand of a clock, and this is like 12 o'clock, as we come past like 1 o'clock, we get to the point where we can actually get our body weight on top of that pedal and produce a lot of force. So from 1 o'clock to, let's call it maybe like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock down around here, we're just going to be applying the most amount of power into that stroke. So if you think about it, if we're at that torso lean, we're in this position where, again, we have like kneecap relatively over top of the toes. We have access to both the anterior and the posterior. So the front and the back of the body, we have the biggest muscle groups involved. So we have the quads, we have the glutes, and that's really what's going to be generating the most power in that position. As we're doing that, we also could potentially be pushing and pulling on the handles as well to contribute to that. But again, most of that power is going to come in between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the stroke. So a lot of people look at that really small window of 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock and they think, if that's really the only place that I can be applying pressure, like where else can I sort of generate more power throughout the stroke? The immediate places I go to, because they don't have clips, is like at the bottom and the top, where I can kind of put in power if I'm like scraping mud off the bottom of my foot at the bottom, like doing like this prodding action where I'm getting some, again, input from the bottom of the stroke, or at the very top of the stroke where they come around and they think about sort of kicking their foot forward like that and almost doing like a knee extension at the top, where again they're pushing from like 11 o'clock across to 1 o'clock. And both of those are really inefficient ways to actually input energy. Like you put a lot of muscular contraction and tension in for the very little output that you actually get put into the bike. So I really don't recommend doing that, right? You want to think about, again, being at the most advantageous position where you can come over the top of the stroke and put in all that power. Because again, you have the upper body that you can evolve here, you don't have clips, and it's just a relatively inefficient position. And for a lot of people, they already have issues with their quads blowing up on the bike. So by pushing forward and basically doing a leg extension up here at the top, that's just going to make that problem worse. And the same thing at the bottom, if you're really thinking about prodding at the bottom, it's going to just, again, light up your posterior then with your hamstrings, your calf, right, where that's just adding more tension and it's not really adding any benefit. And actually, as you come around the back of the stroke, a lot of people think like, oh, I don't have clips, so I can't pull up. But you have to realize that just because your joint angle stays relatively at the same place with your ankle, so as you come up in the bottom of the stroke, your foot is actually pointed, or heel's sort of pointed back or up towards the ceiling a little bit. So you can actually use that to pull if you wanted to. Again, I wouldn't recommend doing that, but you could do it if you wanted to. So the biggest takeaways here is we have to realize that there's a relatively small window where you're going to generate the most power. After you come up above the top of the stroke, and once you get to 1 o'clock, you're going to stomp down, put all that power into that stroke between like 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock, and then you're just going to kind of ride out the back of that stroke and allow that musculature to actually relax, get some blood in, get blood out, right? Be able to move those waste products around and create sustainability through doing that. So that's the goal, is to create this movement and make it a cyclical movement, right? Just because it's something that's on an erg, people think automatically it's cyclical and sustainable, and that's not always the case for people. So the goal is to make this as efficient, as sustainable as possible. Optimizing this pedal stroke, that's one of the ways that we can do that.